Hi, I am Kelly Gildea, and I am a senior executive producer at Penguin Random House Audio. And I also sometimes get to direct, and I have been lucky enough to work with this gentleman that I'm here with today, J.D. Jackson, who is a wonderful narrator, an excellent actor, and just one of my favorite people, who has just come off recording a biography about John Lewis. His Truth is Marching On by John Meacham. Welcome, JD. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today talking.
Thank you
about
for having me.
audiobooks.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
JD, did you always know that you wanted to be an actor?
No. No, actually I wanted to, first I wanted to be an obstetrician. Yeah. And then I wanted to be an Air Force pilot. High school, I was in an acting class. Me and a friend of mine were kind of clowns. We like to show off a little too much, actually. And my high school teacher, Mr. Mattins, he asked us to, audition for the school play. The play was called "And They Dance Real Slow in Jackson." And he said if we got in the play, we wouldn't have to take the test at the end of the semester, the final exam, which was a written exam. And we're like, why are we taking a written exam? And this is a performance class. Sure, we'll audition for this. So we got in the play, actually, me and my friend, and I fell in love with it. It wasn't really until I was working on my MFA that I decided I wanted to pursue acting. So, I've always loved performing. I love storytelling, so I figured, any way that I could tell a story I was happy, whether I was part of being a stage manager or even directing. I directed a, main stage play at my undergrad school. So whether I was doing that or whether I was actually acting or teaching acting or, I just loved I love being around storytellers and being a part of a story being told. So, it ended up making sense for this to be, where I kind of found my growth. Yeah.
It's so interesting to think of you being this kind of like goofball showboat.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not how I think of you, because I think
yeah,
of you as such a quiet,
yeah.
thoughtful, private actor. That's sort of when I met you. In fact, like one of my first memories of you is of you were reading this book called Dodgers. I don't know if you remember that book.
Bill
And I
Beverly,
remember,
yeah.
coming into the studio to say hi to you and to ask you how you were. And I remember just having this really deep, thoughtful conversation with you about like character motivation. And I thought like, wow, this guy, I love this guy. Like, I don't really get to talk to actors that I'm not working with directly in the studio about content this deep. And it just stayed with me, and I always remember that about you, that
Well, I
always,
was,
like quietly thinking
yeah.
deeply about.
I've always been a deep thinker, but I've also been a goofball. Yeah, yeah. My wife will tell you. Yeah, I can get
Yeah.
real goofy at times.
It's funny too, because you and I this summer worked on a kid's book where you got
Right.
to do like some really silly, crazy voices, and we were laughing about the difference between some
Right.
of the content you've done, some really serious content, like
Yeah.
getting to read Congressman Lewis's biography, and then
Yeah.
getting to do, the voices of these like wild kids
Yeah.
books. And how do you, balance the content? Like, how do you give everything that you do your all?
Whether it's a kid's book, I can find the joy in that. I can find the challenge in that. Whether it's a biography, I can find the joy in that, and the challenge in that, and a different voice. It's like, I don't know if it's just always been innate, but when I start to read something, and I always did this as a kid. Actually, I would take, books when I was like 5 years old. I remember picking up books and just reading them aloud and putting on a big performance. And I would take the Bible and I would just do sermons, just like Congressman Lewis with the chickens. I would do the sermons to my action figures in my bedroom. So, and then my parents, people at church, oh, he's going to be a minister. I was like, no, not going to happen. But yeah, I was always just letting the language of the literature kind of, I guess, being a conduit for it, just reading it and allowing the words to kind of take off from there. And it's an interesting thing. My mom always laughs about the fact that I read books for a living because there's a story behind that. When I was young, um, I was a fast reader. I started reading before I was in kindergarten. So I would get in, everyone was always shocked. My mom, when people would come over, I was like the parlor trick. Here, read this in front of like, and I have the book in front of my face and try to read it super fast. And I got in second grade, and my favorite teacher in the world, I won't say her name, um, but she gave me a C in reading. She gave me a low mark, but I was surprised. I was shocked because I was doing all the work. I was, doing all the tests, and my mother brought me up to the principal's office, and she did the same thing. She pulled the newspaper off his desk and was like, "Read this newspaper." And so I read the newspaper, and the principal was like, "Okay, we'll have a talk with the teacher here." And then after that, I started going to like a grade up for reading. So I would leave the classroom and go to third grade reading for my reading sessions. So it's just an interesting story my mom always talks about when we bring up the topic of reading books for a living. So
How do you, as an actor who obviously, is so reactive, how do you do that? And how do you get such beautiful, nuanced performances in these characters without the reactions of other
yeah,
actors?
that's a great question because as actors, I think that's the most important part of being an actor is listening. For me, that's when I can tell the difference between a good actor and a great actor. A great actor their acting is in their listening, how they're absorbing what the other person is saying, how that affects their pitch, their rate. Whether they meet them at that same affect level when they're speaking, and then you can hear the musicality between those two people speaking. So, like that is acting to me. So when I'm in the booth, I don't always approach it as acting as much as um, communicating the characters' thoughts to one another. So it's to me, it's just not the same, I guess, natural approach to it. But I also use acting techniques like, focal point, where I imagine the other person's face on a focal point in front of me, uh, and so if you have a good imagination, or if that works for you, if you're the type of person who can visualize and actually see another person's face, um, then I kind of try to communicate with that person. It helps me also to keep my head up and look at the person while I'm reading, so then I feel like I'm communicating up and out, to the person, and then watching, imagining their reaction and then giving it back.
Do you have um, a novel, or maybe it's a piece of nonfiction you've done that really stands out as something that deeply affected you narrating?
Oh
That
yeah. Um,
yeah.
the Nickel Boys. Uh, that was yeah, that was a journey. His Truth is Marching On. I knew a lot of John Lewis, but actually, you know, it really laid out the courageousness of this man. Because I guess sometimes you look at it almost um, like he's this mythical figure, like he's just this legendary man who, like he's bigger than life. And then what you see is this is just a kid who was preaching to chickens in his in his backyard, who cared so deeply about the animals, um, and he cared so deeply about people and God, that he could not he basically sacrificed his own body and his own life for the betterment for other people. And the abuse he took, and his his being unafraid to endure it, never, like, that was, I guess, the most shocking part of it for me, is like reading how he was, that it wasn't like this, oh, I don't know, I don't want to go here. This is going to be done. It was like immediate. Let's get back up. Let's go do it again. This has to happen because his enemy was, the violence. And so he was like, if we let violence win, then we don't win, so it can't win. If you beat me down and I say, okay, I've had enough, that means your approach won, and so he refused to, to submit to that. So I have so much more. I don't know if you can, but I think anybody who reads this or listens to it will have even more of a profound respect for his legacy and his contributions, to our country and the world.
We're nearing the end.
Okay.
I don't want to embarrass you, but there's one
that
thing.
means I'm going to be embarrassed. Okay.
No. There's one thing recently that you tweeted.
Okay.
That I thought was beautiful, and I wanted to just read it back to you, because you're the father of 3 boys.
Yeah.
Right. You recently tweeted after Chadwick Boseman passed away.
Right.
You wrote, "Taking my young kings to see him be a king. We'll never forget that feeling. Love, live, forgive. Hashtag RIP Chadwick Boseman. Hashtag life is a gift."
Yeah.
This was another actor, beautiful actor that I think of like you, but also just as a Black man taking your sons to see this beautiful actor in this beautiful role. Can you just tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first movies I remember as a kid is the first Superman movie. It's the first movie I think I remember and wanting to see again and again. And back then it was like you couldn't see the movie. Once it left, it left, or it had to come to HBO, and so I would just have this thirst to see that movie, and I loved superheroes, comics, sci-fi, that kind of thing. But I never saw myself in any of that kind of stuff. And this character, I knew when this movie was coming out, I was like, what it represented for young Black kids. It was similar to the Obama effect, that they could see themselves as not just superheroes, because of course they'll never be a superhero, but I mean a superhero in the comic book sense, but that they could see themselves majestic, in control, in charge, and not just that, as actors, as directors, as movie producers, as movers and shakers in an institution that is largely kept people that look like them out of power and out of the gatekeeping positions. And this movie changed that, not just because of the optics, but because of the economics. So for me, watching them see a movie that Hollywood said, let's go all in financially with, let's go all in promotionally with, let's have a young Black director helm this project. Let's let them do what they believe this, let them produce what they believe this should be, and for it to deliver the way it did, and to watch, when you look over, it was weird because I've taken my kids to countless Marvel movies, but it was like this movie, I was like, just looking at them constantly, while I was watching it, and they were just in awe, so it definitely is one of those moments that you remember and you cherish.
What's the first book you narrated?
I believe it was Junebug and the Reverend by Alice Mead.
Essential item for recording?
Vocalese throat spray.
What was your favorite book as a child?
How to Eat Fried Worms.
Book or audiobook you'd recommend?
Jeremy Irons' Alchemist, that I wouldn't dare try to redo.
What's your in-booth uniform?
Shorts and flip-flops and cutoff tee. And sometimes less than that in these Texas suburbs.